All right, so as always, I'll begin with create React app, and then I'll just call this dice project or dice exercise. And I'll just call it dice. Nope, there we go. And I'll see you in the year 2255 when this finally finishes. There we go. Make sure I CD into it. I always forget. And then npm start. And here is our beautiful application. Okay, so let's go to the text editor. I've already opened it up. We're going to begin by working on that die component. So I'm going to make a new file called die.js and then do the standard import React component from React. I'm going to define my class, which is die extends component, and that needs to be lowercase. And then I'll add in a simple render, and I always like to start with just, something to make sure everything's connected. So let's do an h1 that just says die. Okay, and then export default die. Sounds like a command, die. Okay, so now in our app.js, I just want to make sure we're getting something to display. So I'm going to delete everything, or almost everything. We don't need the logo, and we do need to import die from /die. And then we're going to render a single die for now, which is not going to be much to look at all. Let's take a look. All right, it's showing up. That's all we care about for now. Next, let's get those icons installed so that we can, show the correct face. So I'm going to just go to that CDN link I included somewhere. Here it is, and copy it. So I'm going to take that and then close out of here. So I copied that link, and then in my public directory, I haven't really been over here much, somewhere inside of the head, we're just going to paste this in, just like that, and save. So now we should have access to the Font Awesome icons. So we can close out of this, and we're going to test it out in our die.js. We're now going to return an icon. So it's an I tag like this, and then the class, so class name, I'm going to start with just a hard-coded one like FAS. If we go back and look at the documentation or just what we have here, let's just copy this, FAS and then FA-dice-1. Okay, FAS and then FA-dice-1 and save. And is it going to work? There we go. We have our first icon showing up. So next, before we worry about styling, let's make this so that it can change dynamically based off of a prop that is passed in. So if we go to my app.js, which we're going to have another component actually passing in the props, right? It's going to come from this roll dice component that doesn't exist yet. But let's say face, let's call it face equals, and we'll start it with, let's do 5. It's a nice face. Okay, so now inside of my die, instead of doing this right here, FA-dice-1, what we're going to want to do is add in this.props.face. So we could do it as a separate variable and create the class name up top. We could also do it dynamically by instead using JSX braces here, adding JavaScript in, and using our backticks to interpolate a value right here. So this is always the same every time up until this dash. And then this value right here is going to change. So we use the $, and more curly braces, this.props.face. But remember, you could always take this out and come up here and say let class or CLS equal that, and then you just give that as the class name. But since it's pretty short, I'm just going to do it in line. We don't have much for our die icon anyway. It's going to be a very short render. Now let's test it out. Take a look. We're getting 5. And we should continue if we make a couple of these. Let's do 5, 6, let's do 3, and 2. And there we go. We have the correct faces showing up. So there's really not much else to the die class aside from styling, which we'll do in just a moment, and then also the animation, which I guess we could just say that's part of styling, but I'm going to save the animation for a later video in this section. So let's just make them larger and give them some color. So I'm going to make my die CSS and make sure over here I import that file. So import ./die.css. Then in my CSS file, I could just select all icons, but if we happen to have other icons in this app, that's not a great idea. So I just want to put that out there. There's nothing really wrong with doing that, but we can also just put a class called die in here, which is a standard thing to do. And then over here, we can select .die and say font size, let's make them 10 EMs. And let's give them a little bit of padding. And then a color. So you could also set color up to be a prop if you wanted to pass in a color, if you want to have multicolored dice. But I'm going to pass in, I think I did slate blue. Let's check. And there we go. They're showing up great. It's the color I'm going to work with. And we're done enough with the die class. We're going to come back, of course, to animate things. But now, in the next video, we're going to move on to managing the state, basically picking the props that we're going to pass in here. So we have this stateless simple component. Some people might call it dumb, but that's very offensive to this die component. And all it does is it renders a icon depending on a prop that's been passed in. So next up, we're going to make a parent component that is rendering these and dynamically choosing these faces.